Hi, everyone. Paul Stankista here, candidate for Pennsylvania State Senate. I'm on Pitt's campus today talking with some younger voters. Last week, I started a conversation about higher education in Pennsylvania and how our students are facing the worst student debt crisis in the nation, and how that crisis can be traced back to decades of neglect from our state legislature. I also mentioned how our state has an entire government agency that's devoted to providing financial aid to higher ed students, called the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency, or PHEAA. PHEAA is in charge of administering the financial aid programs that are designed by our state legislature and very occasionally funded by our state legislature. So, what PHEAA is supposed to be doing is easing our student debt crisis and making higher education less financially burdensome to students. Unfortunately, what they're actually doing is the exact opposite. They're making it more expensive, they're making it less accessible for the people of Pennsylvania through gross mismanagement and really abusive practices that they have been practicing for the better part of a decade, and that have triggered a shameful sequence of scandals and lawsuits. PHEAA has been sued by the federal government, several state governments, and countless students for their unfair practices. And they've lost every single time, by the way. These are not frivolous lawsuits. And there are so many of them that I'm not going to be able to remember them. I'm going to have to read them off of a list here. In 2017, PHEAA was sued by the Massachusetts state government for preventing borrowers from making payments on their loans, overcharging borrowers, refusing to refund students for illegal charges, and wrongfully holding money that it was not entitled to collect. PHEAA settled that lawsuit in 2021, promising to compensate all the affected borrowers. In 2019, PHEAA was also sued by the New York state government for, quote, deceptive, unfair, and abusive practices in administering student loan programs. PHEAA settled that lawsuit in 2022, again promising to compensate all of the affected borrowers. In 2021, PHEAA was censured by the United States Congress for, quote, false and misleading testimony. PHEAA CEO had actually claimed under oath that the agency had never been penalized by the Department of Education. But later, Congress learned that PHEAA had actually been penalized 9 different times in the preceding 5 years alone. Basically, they lie about the trouble that they get into. In 2024, the Federal Consumer Financial Protections Bureau sued PHEAA twice in the matter of a few weeks. First, the CFPB sued PHEAA for, quote, a pattern of noncompliance that included failing to provide proper information to borrowers and incorrectly denying forbearance requests. Just a few weeks later, the CFPB sued PHEAA again, this time for illegally collecting on loans discharged in bankruptcy and sending false information to credit agencies. A federal court ruled in 2024 that PHEAA has to pay monetary redress to all the affected borrowers and civil monetary penalties, as well as submit to further oversight from the CFPB. However, when the Trump administration took power in 2025, they came to PHEAA's rescue and withdrew the lawsuits and all requirements for restitution. I'm reminded of the words of Sancho Panza, the faithful friend of Don Quixote in the novel Don Quixote, who said, "Tell me who your friends are, and I'll tell you who you are." Well, apparently, the best friend of PHEAA in the whole world is Donald J. Trump, and that should tell you exactly the type of people that we're dealing with here. Our state leaders have no one to blame but themselves for the actions of PHEAA, because not only is it a state government agency, but a vast majority of the members of the board of directors of PHEAA are elected state legislators. And not to get too political here, but the incumbent in the state senate district that I'm running for, and my opponent in the Democratic primary, is State Senator Wayne Fontana, who is the chairman of the board of directors of PHEAA and has been sitting on the board since 2009. He is directly responsible for the behavior of PHEAA for over a decade, and he has done absolutely nothing to help the students who have been injured by PHEAA's actions. During the Massachusetts and New York lawsuits that I mentioned before, Senator Fontana and the other legislators on the board of directors of PHEAA claimed that they were, quote, powerless to do anything to help borrowers, end quote. This is an obvious and ridiculous lie. I have never encountered any organization for which the board of directors could truthfully be called powerless, especially when that organization is a public agency and those directors are public elected officials. And then, in response to the barrage of class action lawsuits from students who were harmed by their proven illegal practices, Senator Fontana simply shrugged them off, saying, quote, "Is it the case that somebody here is not being efficient or being unfair? I don't know that that's the case," end quote. Well, Senator, with all due respect, do you know who does know that PHEAA is inefficient and unfair? Every single court of law that has ever ruled on the laundry list of offenses that have been alleged against your organization. It is truly disturbing that after a decade of being sued by students, neighboring states, and the federal government itself, the board of directors of this public student aid agency would continue to insist that there is nothing wrong and nothing needs to be done. It's become clear to me, at least, that if we are to have any hope of fixing PHEAA and finally delivering relief to student borrowers in Pennsylvania, we need new leadership, not just at PHEAA, but across the state legislature. We need to elect new leaders who will finally prioritize students and graduates who are being crushed under a lifetime of student debt, and who will finally deliver on the promise of lowering the cost of higher education in Pennsylvania. That is a big reason why I'm running, and I hope that you'll join me. Thank you.